The clear-cut cult fell into the trap. We've heard them for years saying, oh, no, we support home hardening, but we also have to do logging. Here was an opportunity to take money that was going almost 100% to logging, have a little bit go to home hardening. They said no. So now these entities are officially on the record saying, we do not want to fund the thing that we know protects homes and lives from wildfire. The gig is up. Welcome, Wild Ones. This is Josh Schlossberg, host of the Green Root Podcast, the official podcast of Eco Integrity Alliance, where we're on a quest to uncover the roots of the ecological crisis. For this episode, I am going to be talking about some bills that did not pass here in Colorado. And yes, they are related to Colorado. Yes, they are related to forests and public lands. But no, the relevance is not just in that regard. This deals with a lot of stuff that's going on across the United States in terms of so-called environmental protection. And it is a harbinger, I don't know, for what is to come. There's good and there's bad in this. So let's start with the good, go into the bad, and then we'll end with good. We'll see. So here was the good. There were two bills introduced into the Colorado legislature. So keep in mind that Colorado is a place that has a lot of public land, some of the most in the United States. And also keep in mind the fact that this is a dry climate, so wildfire is a common occurrence here. We're a blue state, so it's Democrat run and Democrat majority. Yet simultaneously, we are experiencing some of the most public lands extraction of anywhere in the United States, even compared to red states. And the danger in this state, I thought you were going to start with the good, Josh. Well, I'm just laying the groundwork. Give me a break here. The danger is that it is under the guise of environmental protection when it's truly about extraction. So the good is that two bills were introduced into the House Committee for Natural Resources and whatever other words are attached to that committee. And these are some pretty common sense, positive bills. The first one was one that I was not as involved with, so I'll mention that first, and then I'll mention the one that has been central to the work of Eco Integrity Alliance, although both do apply. So the first one was to end the killing of beavers on public lands in Colorado. Beavers have a right to exist. That's, I would say, is enough, but that's never enough in a human-centric world. And a place like Colorado where people are less nature lovers than they are nature users. So in this regard, what happened was protecting beavers would protect beavers. And it would also encourage beavers to do their nature engineering, which is creating dams on streams, which retains moisture in ecosystems. So for anyone paying attention to the science, wildfire is, first of all, natural, essential, including high severity wildfire. However, for those who are concerned about the amount of fire in the forest, and I'll be honest, I'm not. That's not the issue. The issue is communities, which we'll get to in a second. But for those who have concerns about that, it's not about, quote, fuels, which is forest, trees, vegetation, growing material, what a forest is. It is about weather and wind. So if it's dry, it's hot, it's windy, that's when things burn. But retaining moisture on the landscape is a way to reduce some high severity fire. And as long as it's being done with components of natural ecosystems like beavers, I think that's a great thing. So the bill was framed in terms of wildfire and also wildlife, but in terms of wildfire, there was a main push. I think that's fine. I was a little concerned about a lot of the folks who focus on wildlife and not on ecosystems as much. And we got to bring people together more on that. Kind of threw the forest under the bus, basically to protect the beavers, which I 100% support. They're saying these wildfires are out of control. They're terrible. And the only way we can stop these bad wildfires is to have more beavers. And the problem is that reinforces the fire phobic rhetoric, wildfire hysteria, and that results in pretty much nothing but more fuel reduction logging, because that is the government's and agencies' response to wildfire is just cutting down forests, even though it makes things worse and spreads fire more to communities. So that was kind of the tack. Okay, I understand they had a particular goal. We got to work on overlap between wildlife and ecosystem advocacy, but whatever. So they spoke out in favor of the bill. Of course, agencies such as Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they spoke out against the bill, and they had just put out a report on beaver stuff, I think, to preempt this bill. But basically the idea is, oh, we're already figuring stuff out. We got to be able to kill them, but we're figuring it out, so we don't need this bill. Let the science rule. And it's like, well, that's not science. You're agency staff that is managing things based on extreme input from the hunting and trapping community. And there are people who advocate for public lands who might be hunters, I think primarily hunters for food. And we just put out a video on YouTube, on the Green Root Podcast, youtube.com/@GreenRootPodcast, which is a backcountry deer and elk hunter. I don't personally hunt. Eco Integrity Alliance doesn't endorse hunting, but he's a hunter, as is his right on public lands. And he was concerned about the clear cutting that has been harming his hunting ground. So check out that video. But I mean, the point is that there could be people who maybe do hunting on public lands who support ecosystem protection. And I don't know about trappers, but those folks pushed really hard to kill this bill. And even groups, supposed conservation groups like Trout Unlimited, came out against protecting beavers. So that's where we're at. I don't know a ton more details about that particular bill, even though I listened to a lot of the testimony while I was working out, because otherwise anything to do with legislative hearings is not great entertainment. But that bill didn't even get out of committee. So that's a bummer. So what we have right there is an example of something that these agencies and elected officials and NGOs are talking about. We need wildfire resiliency in the landscape, always through logging, which is the opposite of true. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. But then a thing that we know for a fact works, they not only don't support it, they come out in full force to oppose it. I want to make that very clear, that in Colorado, it was opposed by the government agencies, elected officials, and a lot of NGOs, the idea of not killing beavers so we could have more moisture on the landscape. Media outlets like the Colorado Sun, which many call Colorado Pravda, they put out these propaganda articles about how contentious this issue was. It's not contentious. It is those with self-interest advocating to continue the status quo, which is being able to make money off of killing things on public lands, and whether it's trees or beavers, and the agencies counting on tax dollars to keep doing that. So that's a fake contentiousness. That our media is the main reason why these bills don't pass, because of the propaganda they're putting out. Anyway, so that was a bummer. Now let's move into the bill that hits a little closer to home. So a representative by the name of Tammy Story, and I want to mention her by name because she's pretty much one of the few in the Colorado State House who, I'm going to say it based on my engagement thus far, have any integrity when it comes to environmental issues. And Eco Integrity Alliance does not really engage very much at all in legislative. We deal primarily with educating elected officials, whatnot, but we did educate Rep. Tammy Story. We had spoken with her many times in the past. We had taken her out to these logging sites. She came to this public hearing we had with standing room only. audience of people opposing this stuff, and she did start speaking out about this issue, and she proposed a bill. Many of us wanted a bill to stop logging, and she proposed a bill that would take a small percentage of the money going towards logging and route it towards home hardening. So the homes themselves, the materials on the homes, which can be pricey and expensive. And particularly this bill would fund lower income people, people with disabilities, and people really in need who can't do that otherwise. So it seems like a pretty much no-brainer. Why wouldn't we do that? It came from a fund that specifically was designated for focusing on, quote, wildfire mitigation projects that were most, let's just say, relevant for protecting homes and communities and structures, which is home hardening. That's not even a debate. That even the people who love logging have to admit home hardening is essential and the one thing for sure that works. And that's all the bill would do, take a little bit of funding from that over time towards more home hardening. Who wouldn't support that? Well, turns out every single agency in Colorado that gets taxpayer money to do logging, all of the typical elected officials whose governments are doing some of the most aggressive logging we've ever seen, and a bunch of other entities spoke out, not in support of home hardening, but against home hardening. So they said, do not take any logging money to protect homes. That is what they said with their mouths and the sounds from their tongue. And the Natural Resource Committee, which is stacked with people like public lands, ranchers, just all sorts of folks like that. My local representative, Representative Lindsay Smith, who won't even talk to members of the public about this issue. They voted against the bill even getting out of committee. So it didn't even give the rest of the legislators in the State House an opportunity to vote on this and make this public. No media has covered this, so nobody knows that this bill happened. So that's the good. Remember I said I was going to say the good? The good is that this bill was introduced. Did I forget to highlight the good? The bad is that it didn't pass because it was stacked against that. Here's the good again. The good is that they fell into the trap. The clear-cut cult fell into the trap. We've heard them for years saying, oh, no, we support home hardening, but we also have to do logging. Here was an opportunity to take money that was going almost 100% to logging, have a little bit go to home hardening. They said no. So now these entities are officially on the record saying, we do not want to fund the thing that we know protects homes and lives from wildfire. The gig is up. Now, our media is not going to report on this, and they won't run opinion pieces on this, and most of the larger NGOs won't say a thing about this. They'll talk to me privately about it, but they won't speak up. That's changing a little bit. There are a few entities that I think are getting a little bit more involved, and I want to name them by name because I don't believe in just calling out those doing wrong. I believe in calling in first. You talk to them privately. Then when they don't respond, you call them out. But calling out the good. So Environment America, also Environment Colorado, which is sort of its state chapter. They have been engaging on this issue. Center for Biological Diversity has to a certain degree. It seems like maybe more in the days to come. Wild Earth Guardians. So I'm saying these names because they are larger organizations, but they realize that this is a threat. Unlike these other organizations like Conservation Colorado, Western Resource Advocates, the Nature Conservancy, which is a working lands group and not a conservation organization, they're all actively advocating for more taxpayer funding for more logging. And not even logging under restrictions, just any logging is good and they won't speak out. So they fell into the trap and now they are on the public record, if anyone can find out about it besides my podcast, that they are on the record opposing the measures that would protect homes and lives. I feel like I can't say that enough. You're probably like, you've said that plenty. Well, I'll say it again. Now, I'm not going to say it again, but that's what is occurring currently. And now the agenda is naked. And the reason this is important in Colorado and elsewhere, I want to say, is that the reason they're getting away with all this public lands extraction, typically logging, but also grazing, and in some cases mining and drilling, they don't have as good excuses for that, but they're, particularly the logging and grazing, is under this greenwash cover. So they're claiming it's a benefit to nature, etc. And in this case, they have sort of played their hand. They've played their hand by repeatedly saying, we support across the board, we have to do home hardening, but we also have to do logging. And then you find out when it comes down to it, they're like, actually only do logging. Actually only use taxpayer money for logging. Don't reimburse, don't fund low-income people who live out in the forest and cannot afford to protect their homes. Let's do logging and threaten their homes more. So it could be argued that they actually support policies that endanger those of us who live adjacent to public lands, such as myself. Now, notice how I very carefully try to choose my words. The clear-cut cult doesn't do that at all. I see comments about me all the time on social media saying things almost verbatim. Josh Schlossberg wants our communities to burn down. So they can say that about me all the time. I'm not going to say that about them. But what I do believe, and I would never say that about a private citizen, but our elected officials and mostly our agencies, they are supporting funding only for schemes that either do nothing at best to protect homes from wildfire or actually increase the threat. Now we know this for a fact. So for those listening, I want you to use this as an example. We now know what they think and believe and are going to advocate for. They're probably going to get away with it here in Colorado because this is the problem with blue state versus red state. And then I'll probably finish the episode on this. And I'm actually going to be talking with more folks about this who are more experts on that beaver bill, etc. But in a blue state, one's like, cool, we've got Democrats here, our congressional delegation and folks at the state and county and even local are typically Democrats, right? And that is seen as a good thing because in many cases, Democrats will be more pro-environment. Now, I know some libertarians or Republicans who are pro-environment, and I encourage them to be more pro-environment, but we have to acknowledge right now, most folks who are pro-environment tend to lean Democrat, but not in Colorado. So in Colorado, the very people who wake up in the morning cursing Trump's name for harming public lands are actively making the decisions to do more public lands logging in Colorado than Trump has any say over. Just the other day, there was a county commissioner who we've been trying to talk to about logging public lands here in Boulder County. And I just saw by accident, because I don't read these newspapers, I was at the dentist office, there was an opinion piece saying how important it is to protect public lands and shaking her fist verbally against the Trump administration. And I'm like, you're logging our public lands and you won't even acknowledge our information. So that is more dangerous than in a red state where they're like, or doing like what Trump did. We're going to expand American timber production. Why? Oh, we want more timber production. Like, well, yikes. Well, thanks for being honest, I guess. Meanwhile, Democrats are like, so we 100% support every single policy that the Trump administration is putting out regarding public lands extraction, yet we're going to say that we're doing it for environmental protection. Now, I got to ask you, which is more dangerous? Oh, Josh is saying vote for Trump and Republicans. I have never voted Republican, and I would not vote for Trump, and I don't plan on voting Republican anytime soon, but I have to admit, I stopped voting Democrat as well years ago because I saw how the sausage was made. And right here in Colorado, the wagons are circled because everyone's on the same team. So we have these elected officials, we have government agency staff, we have NGOs, we have media. They all fraternize in their same circles. And yes, most of them are Democrats. I know for those who are Democrats, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, this is hard to hear. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be a Democrat. I'm not saying pro-Republican. I'm just speaking the honest truth as I see it of what actually happens on the ground, who's supporting what, and how it happens. So we have a harder time in blue states like this getting the word out about these schemes, even alerting them to the biggest logging projects, alerting the public to the biggest logging projects in the state history. Our media won't even report on that because they're all so cozy together. So in another state like Utah or Montana, media might be more adversarial to the establishment. Here, it is the establishment. They're all the establishment. And entities, all sorts of entities. And I'm going to mention this, even though I was told not to. Patagonia has hosted a panel of U.S. Forest Service and other loggers to promote logging under the guise of conservation. And when we tried to engage with having members on that panel, they refused. They said, oh, you can come there and ask a question. They wouldn't let us ask a single question. We said, would you do a follow-up event? They refused. They stopped talking to us. We contacted a different store in Denver. They won't talk to us either. So all of these entities that wrap themselves around environmentalism, like an entity up here called Wild Bear Nature Center, they host and promote more public lands logging than we have seen in our lifetimes. I am not exaggerating. This is for real. And that is the danger. What is your point, Josh? Great point about my point. My point is just to report on what is happening right now. And in terms of the efforts to do so through our existing system, right now they are closed to us because we don't have a functional participatory democracy. We don't have government holding industry accountable. We don't have media holding government accountable. We don't have NGOs holding anything accountable except for a small number of the grassroots. And that's where I want to end this. Oh, good. I figured out my point here. So we have some great folks in the grassroots here who are fighting this stuff and who are offering a proactive vision of public lands as, one way of framing it is biodiversity, climate, watershed, refugia. There's some other great efforts that are about to happen nationally. Something called New Direction for Public Lands that Eco Integrity Alliance is a part of, and you should be too. More on that to come. So there are great things that are being done, but we are outnumbered, 1,000 to 1, and we're outspent 100 million to 1, probably 1 billion to 1. So if you're listening to this, I encourage you to please engage in your local level, nationally. If you're in Colorado, please contact us. No question about that. You can email coloradosmokescreen@proton.me. That's coloradosmokescreen@proton.me, or go to coloradosmokescreen.org and just check out what's going on here in Colorado. But we're doing this work with Eco Integrity Alliance across the U.S. One of our main focuses is also Utah. And weirdly, we may have more purchase there because of that dichotomy between at least red and blue, whereas here it's pretty much, it's all blue. And I guess the thing I forgot to mention was then we have half of the state that is very pro-extraction Republicans. And so they're coming together on that. But we tried to do these bills. They won't even let those get out there. People aren't even aware this stuff is happening. But they have made their agenda very clear. And I think now we can use that to point out where these folks truly are at. We can strip away their greenwash cover and say, listen, if you want to advocate for extraction, you have to publicly admit that's what you're doing. And they've basically already done that. So utilizing that information while having this positive agenda of public lands protection, ecosystem advocacy, and as it can tie into a global biodiversity framework, which is something that would like to see 30% of the world's ecosystems protected by 2030, and then 50% over time. And that's part of the half Earth vision of sociobiologist E.O. Wilson, the late great E.O. Wilson. 50% of the Earth's both terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems and ocean ecosystems protected as actual preserves, not working lands extraction. That's not protection. And so all of that stuff, I think, can really start turning this around. But all the other pieces I've talked about in these podcasts, we have to do a better job of organizing. We have to do a better job of putting out our own media. We have to look at a culture of ecosystem advocacy where this is just front and center in our lives and in a joyful, celebratory way. So getting out there on hikes and positive things, having fun and parties and musical get-togethers and arts around all of this stuff. And ultimately, it may be a deeper level spirituality where, like indigenous people figured out tens of thousands of years ago, that we are a part of nature. Nature is a part of us. It is all part of the same system, and to destroy nature is destroying ourselves. So a spirituality around that, whatever your background is or particular view on that, we may all differ on how that looks, but I think all of that needs to happen for this stuff to start turning around. And I believe, this is how I will end this. I know I tend to point out what's wrong, and sorry, that is kind of my role as an advocate, but also my role is to point out a positive vision. And I will take the criticism from myself here that I should be doing more of the pointing out the positive vision, and I intend to. Basically, to sum things up, if we incorporate these pieces, I truly believe that we can be creating a better world where humanity is more in sync, if not in harmony, less impactful on the natural world. I truly do believe that that is something that can happen. But unless the pieces that I've laid out, says I, happen, if those don't happen, we won't get there. But if we do those things, we will get there. So this is a message of hope, but it's a message of we need to put in the work. And part of that work is actually play and enjoyment. And unfortunately in Colorado, every time I try to go for a hike, I run into a damn clear cut. So I'm working on that. But aside from that, we can just go into the wilderness and be safe there for now. Let's figure out ways that we can engage with one another and unite our movements and come together for this positive vision. So then bills like the ones that were proposed are going to be no-brainers. They're just going to pass en masse, but we're not there yet. We need to do more of the groundwork. We need your help at Eco Integrity Alliance. So if you live anywhere in the United States or are a alien from Saturn who comes down here occasionally, if you are a wolf that somehow understands English, get in touch with us. You can contact us in a variety of methods, and we hope to hear from you soon.